everyone, my name's Bee. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about things I'm interested in. And this week I am talking about 5 books that I might love off of my bookshelf. This year I got Amazon Prime Reads. I got a bunch of short stories on my Kindle and I read them. And some of the authors, I have books on my shelf. So I figured if I like the short story, maybe I'll read a book by the same author and hopefully I'll vibe with him. I'll really find my next favorite author. So I have 5 books of authors' short stories that I've read recently, so I'm gonna kind of match them up with their short stories. And the first is The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. I read her short story on Prime Reads called Emergency Skin, which was a little bit more sci-fi, like technology, and this is a little bit more fantasy. I think N.K. Jemisin usually writes fantasy. I think that's what her other books are about. So I'm interested to see like what her main genre is like. I've heard really great things about this and I've had this on my shelf for probably 10 years and it's like very different than the type of fantasy that I'm used to. So I'm excited to read The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. Okay, the next one is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I read Summer Frost very recently on Prime Reads, which was also sci-fi. That one was about an AI that kind of becomes sentient and the things that happen after the people realize that it's become sentient. Dark Matter is also sci-fi. I think it's one of his most famous books. It's been adapted into a television show, which I have not watched. And Dark Matter is about a guy who goes out one night drinking with his friends and is on his way home when he's kidnapped and drugged, and he wakes up in a completely different world, a world where he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have a kid, and he has made an incredible scientific discovery. He's able to basically control the multiverse. He's able to navigate the multiverse through his machine. Really fascinating stuff. Super excited. I love sci-fi, and I really liked the Blake Crouch AI short story, so I feel like this one's gonna be good. The next book that I have is Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I read The Visit. I read the short story The Visit on Prime Reads by the same author, and that one was about, so it was set in a world similar to ours, but instead of the government trying to regulate reproductive rights of women, they're trying to regulate the reproductive rights of men. And so it's from the husband's perspective as his wife kind of ignores the fact that he's being restricted. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating story. I've also read her short novella, We Should All Be Feminists, which I absolutely loved. I read that several years ago and I loved it. I think she has a very important take on feminism and a very nuanced stance on it that is, I think, very important on where we stand going forward in our current society. I'm excited to read this. I'm kind of afraid of it though, because it looks really serious and heavy and deep, but I think I'm ready for it. I think I've read enough of her to kind of get a taste of her writing and be prepared for what she's going to talk about in this book. The next one is Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. I recently read her short story called Cut and Thirst, which is also kind of a political short story. I mentioned in my last wrap-up video that I had to reread it and I didn't understand what it was about, but it's about a woman who is kind of silenced based on something happened to her with a group of men. She's forced into silence and her friends kind of gather around and plan to murder some of the men in this thing. And it's supposed to be kind of like darkly funny, which she does a very good job. Margaret Atwood does a fantastic job. She also does a great job of normal dark tragedy with The Handmaid's Tale, which I have read and watched the show. Horrifying. I have read several other Margaret Atwood books as well, and this is unfortunately the only one besides The Handmaid's Tale that I have on my shelf. So I thought I would give it a try. The last one is The End and Other Beginnings by Veronica Roth. This is a book of short stories by Veronica Roth. I think I read 2 recently, 2 short stories by Veronica Roth off of Prime Reads. The first was not coming to me. The second one is Arc, but there are 2 and I will put them up on the screen now that I read, and both of them were sci-fi and I enjoyed them immensely over Divergent, which I read several years ago. So I'm excited to get back into Veronica Roth, especially if she is writing like time travel short stories. This just seems really, really interesting to me and something that I think I could definitely get into. Yeah, super excited about this last one. 5 of these authors I've read before, I've read their work, I'm familiar. So now it's just kind of like finding out if their backlist is any good. I will give you an update when I get through some of them, and we'll see how we go.
You think we cannot guess your plans. They cannot smell the fury curling off you like smoke.
So, I have to run a few errands today. I have to pick up some records, prescription. I am listening to The Killing Moon on audio. Now that I've finished Brave Story, I feel like I can definitely take another dip into the fantasy pool. I'm reading this book by N.K. Jemisin because I recently read her short story novella on Amazon Prime called Emergency Skin. That one was more sci-fi, more like our world just set in the future. The Killing Moon is more another world with another system of politics and language and race and magic as well. And I realized that this is, I don't know if this is considered high fantasy, but it is very in-depth fantasy. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of names. Like some of the characters have multiple names, like names that they go by in certain situations. So it is a little difficult to keep up with. I'm going to be honest. I feel like if I wasn't paying attention for even just 1 second, which I think happened at one point when I was on my walk or something when I was listening to this, you know, if you're not paying attention for just 1 second, you are lost. You can get very easily lost if you're not paying attention to names and what's happening. It's a great and very interesting story. The pacing is great. I'm interested in like where everything's going, and there's not too much world building that happens at the beginning to throw you off course, but she does just legitimately throw you into this world and just like figure it out. Because she's just like going. She's like, yep, we're here and we're moving into the action, and like that's cool. But I am feeling like I'm a little bit reeling, like with all of the names. Like I haven't quite picked up all of the characters' names and who's who and who's related to who, because that's also information that just gets kind of thrown at you, and if you pick it up, you pick it up, and if you don't, then you missed it and you might be a little behind. That's how I definitely feel about the story so far. It's not too bad where I feel like I have to quit. I definitely think I am going to finish it, but it has made me realize that in order to read fantasy, I feel like I have to pay attention or like take notes or something, because this is the same feeling I had when I read Game of Thrones. Just like a bunch of names, bunch of places, a bunch of, you know, world information just kind of thrown at you at once, and you need to like get it to stick or something. N.K. Jemisin's The Killing Moon so far is pretty good. It's pretty good. So we'll see how it goes. It's literally been raining all day today, which has been perfect for reading, especially for reading The Killing Moon. Oh my gosh. I started out with such negative thoughts about this book. I just felt lost, and it's probably because I just finished reading a huge long fantasy book, but oh my god, I'm so close to the end. I'm so hooked. There's a sequel, and it's just a duology. There's no more books after the sequel, at least that I can tell. By this point, it's been out for so long, I really hope there's not more books coming out. Really, really hope. But I might read the next one because I'm invested. I finally figured out most of the characters' names and like who's related to who, and like kind of like how everything interconnects. But I'm at this point where I almost want to go back and reread like the first half of the book, just so I can like pick up anything that I didn't quite understand now that I know like how things are coming together. I have a really bad feeling that this book is gonna end on a cliffhanger, and I'm gonna need to read the second book immediately. So how much is it? What's it called? The Shadowed Sun. It's 75 cents. It's got a good rating. Why is it only 75 cents on Kindle? I might just get the second book. I might just get the second book on Kindle so I can have it and be ready to read it when I finish this. Wow, I haven't done that in a long time. And this is surprising considering how much I was like ready to hate this. Like, it's crazy. But N.K. Jemisin's writing is so good. Her way of like presenting these characters, like there's so much in this that I'm just like really shocked by. For a book that was published in 2012, why didn't I hear more about this? It really is really good. If you read this a long time ago and never like thought anything of it, definitely give it a reread. If you've never read this, this is really good. It takes a while to get into, like it did take me over half the book to like really get into it. But if you can push through that first like 55-60%, thumbs up. Two, if I could put them, 2 thumbs up. So I finished it. Just realized there's a glossary. There's a glossary in this book that talks about all of the lore that would have been kind of helpful while I was reading this. Good to know now. Anyway, this book is really great. It did not end on a cliffhanger the way I thought it would. But I still got the second one on Kindle just because I do want to know what the second one is. If it's like future, if it's like next, or if it's like past from this. I do want to know because I'm really interested. It's a really, really good book. Highly, highly, highly recommend. I don't think I ever gave like a plot summary. It's a high fantasy novel. I say high fantasy because the names, the characters, the intertwining of the characters is pretty intricate, complex, you know? But it's set in a completely different world where magic exists, and this magic comes in the form of gatherers who are people who are able to set a soul free from life. Basically, it's like a killing, like they kill people, but they do it for 2 reasons. They do it for people who are on the brink of death who want to find peace in the afterlife, and people who are corrupt, and to basically cleanse the waking world of their corruption, right? And all of it is kind of intertwined with this idea of like their belief system and their religion, which is really fascinating. All the while, this is the world where there's like corruption going down. Like there's people in power who are trying to make political moves, trying to become powerful, more powerful than they already are, and there's this creature that's on the loose that's killing people, and they call it a reaper because it kind of kills for, it gathers, but it kills a person's soul, right? It's not a peaceful killing the way that the religious gatherers do it. So I had to read the whole book. I had to read 60% of that book to understand that. Just a heads up, it is very deep. But like the cover quote says, the world is so fully fleshed out that I could breathe its spices. So true. She could do a lot more, I feel like, with this world that she's created. That's why I'm anxious to read the second one. So we'll see. But this was a good pick. 5 stars. Yes. I hope the rest are as good as this one. Okay, so quick update on the books that I thought I would love. I finished The Killing Moon. Did I love it? I think I close to loved it. I did mix it up with audiobook and reading this, and I'm really glad that I listened to the audiobook first because it helped like so much with the pronunciations of some of the names and characters, which did help kind of keep track of all of the characters and places in this book. I would say it is really high fantasy. There is a lot to try and figure out at the beginning of this book and the world that it inhabits, but I think it's so incredible, the world that she has created in this book. Very fascinating, interesting story. The more I talk about it, the more I think that this definitely hit. I did end up loving this as much as I hoped I would. So, I like this book, but I just got to the part where he's already had an affair with a different version of his wife, right? So like, is it an affair? No. So the wife is with the different version of him.
So there you go.
I don't know. The next book that I read was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This book is a sci-fi thriller about a man named Jason Dessen who gets kidnapped on his way home one night and wakes up in a world that is not his own. His home is empty, whereas before he had a wife and a kid, and now people are saying he is a scientist who basically created this incredible technological breakthrough. He learns that the breakthrough that he supposedly came up with was figuring out how to traverse the multiverse, except he's not really the one who did it. It's an alternate version of himself who kidnapped him and has taken over his life. The premise is so cool, and I'm so here for the premise. The execution, I was not here for. I guess I've read too many multiverse books. What it would happen if you went to an alternate reality. I think that it's tries to stay true to the science, but I think my review was something like so many unanswered questions. Loved the concept, but Jason Dessen, the main character, is my least favorite character. I really don't like him at all. And I don't know if I was supposed to, but I just did not like him. In my opinion, I think there are too many unanswered questions at the end of this book. If I had read this book maybe 4 years ago, I would have felt like into it more, or it would have been more mind-blowing to me. But I guess because I've read so many books with this premise recently that I like better, I didn't like this as much, which is kind of sad because I was really hoping to like Blake Crouch and the copy of Dark Matter that I have on my shelf. I liked his short story, but unfortunately his novel, Dark Matter, was not a hit for me. I don't know what I'm gonna read next. I have Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood, or what are the other two? Oh, that's right, Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and then I also have the Veronica Roth short stories collection, The End and Other Beginnings. I don't know which one I'm gonna pick up next. I think I might take a break, read something else, and then just go from there with my mood. We'll see. I'll update you when I get to the next book. So I just started reading Cat Eye. I just started listening to the audiobook on Spotify, and I'm already in love with it. I like literally every line. I want to go back through my copy and just start highlighting because it's so good. It is not a YA book. I don't know why I thought it was YA. I think because I originally got my copy at a library book sale where the high school that I was working for, like, weeding their collection, and this was one of the books that they were getting rid of. So I guess I assumed it was YA, but it is definitely not a YA book. It is about a woman named Elaine who is a painter. And so far, I think it's like her retrospective. She's a painter, so she's like doing a retrospective in the book, but she's also having a retrospective about her life and about her past and about just like aging and how kind of like disturbing it is, but also how kind of relatable it is. And it is very relatable. I'm really glad I'm reading it, not just at this point in the year, but like at this point in my life, because it just feels like it's hitting all of the right notes right now. And I'm only like 2%. It's crazy. I'm so excited. I'm reading Cat's Eye, and I gotta be honest, this book is not at all what I expected it to be. I thought this book was something about completely different than what I'm actually reading, and I don't even know at this point what I'm reading. That's how weird it is. I like weird books, but this is kind of weird in the way that I'm like, what is this book even about? The first few pages that I read, I really, really liked. I was like, oh, this is gonna be really good. It's about this woman painter who is doing a retrospective. I hate to say this because I love Margaret Atwood, and this is not at all how I've ever felt about any of the books I've ever read by her, but it is boring. It is boring. And granted, like, maybe I'm going into it with the wrong expectation. It does feel like maybe this is supposed to be semi-autobiographical. There doesn't seem to be a lot of tension being built right now. I feel like there's not a lot to go on. I'm like 70, almost 100 pages in. And I'm just like at this point where I'm like, what is going on? I want to keep going because I want to see if something's going to hit. Like if there's going to be like a definitive moment where it's like, oh, this is going to be good. I don't know if it's going to get like more interesting, and I'm really, really worried. It's supposed to be one of the books that I was supposed to love because it's Margaret Atwood, and I loved Handmaid's Tale. I read Oryx and Crake. I love Oryx and Crake. This feels boring. I'm not gonna lie. 100 pages in, and we're going into so much detail about this woman's childhood. It's good writing. It is. It's good writing. It's just not very interesting. I'm not captivated. I want to try and at least get 25% in. Because maybe if I'm 25% through this book, maybe I will feel like there's a purpose to what we're reading. I'm gonna try to get at least 25% in, but if nothing happens at that 25% mark, I don't know if I'm gonna keep reading it. Hi, I've gotten 25% of the way through Cat's Eye. I upped the speed to 1.5 just to like get through the part that I felt was boring. I get what this story is trying to do. Like I get the perspective like of this like coming of age story, like women's perspective. Like, I get it. It does feel like something I have read before though. And that's not to say that this is like derivative in any way, because it's Margaret Atwood. She is a very good writer, and it's good writing. I'm just very bored. I don't know, I guess I was expecting a little bit more intrigue. Like I guess I was hoping for something with just a little bit more like intensity, and like I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't want to say it's bad. I just want to say that I'm bored. I hold her in such high esteem as a writer that I really have this bias against saying that it's not good and that I'm not enjoying it. But I'm not enjoying it. I want to give it more time. There's a part of me that wants to like stick it out and give it a little bit more time, because the parts that I am really enjoying are the parts that are deconstructing this idea of like traditional feminine female experience. Like there's something going on there, and that's kind of interesting. There's such short little interludes that I'm not even getting enough substance from that to be like, okay, let me just get to the next part. I think I'm gonna give it one more day. I think I'm gonna give it one more day on 1.5 speed and see how far I can get. But honestly, if it doesn't capture my attention by tomorrow, I've got to read 2 other library books that are due in 6 days. Plus, I still have another book for this project. I might be giving up on this Margaret Atwood book. Like, it makes me feel so sad. I don't want to give up on her. Okay, so yesterday I said that I would give it one more day on Cat's Eye, and then I was thinking about it last night, and I was like, maybe I should just give up. Because honestly, my day was absolutely terrible yesterday, and it didn't make it any better. You know, life's too short not to have something that brings me joy in my commute. But also, I started listening to it this morning because I was like, let's just do it. Let's just try and listen to it. But then I ran out of listening hours. So that was my decision made for me. I still have the book with me, which I might try to read. What I actually might do is I might just try to jump into my Veronica Roth short stories book. Like take a little break from Cat's Eye. Maybe I'll come back to it when my listening hours come back up. Or maybe I won't. I really need something right now that's going to like make me enjoy sitting in my car. And that's not one of those things. It's just not one of the things that's making me enjoying sitting in my car in traffic. So I think I'm gonna try and find a different audiobook. Cat's Eye is, I'm gonna take a break for now, and if I do go back to it, I will let you know. But right now I'm just gonna take a little break. I literally have this cough that will not go away. I've had it for like the last 2 weeks. It's the season. It is the season. So I found another audiobook. I found an audiobook of the Veronica Roth short story collection, which is like so perfect because that was my number 2 priority for this month. So I'm gonna go ahead and start that. I did bring the print version with me to school today so I could read it at school during our silent reading time. Okay, I'm getting so distracted by the traffic. It's so bad, which means it's gotta be time for an audiobook. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here, start my Veronica Roth audiobook, and hopefully enjoy my morning commute. Hi. So I am working on a door decoration for my classroom, and I have other things that I really need to be doing, but I don't want to do any of them. This is kind of what I want to do. I want to color instead. And I'm going to listen to the last 5 minutes of The Last Story in the End and Other Beginnings by Veronica Roth. That's what I'm going to do, and shirk all of my other responsibilities.
The snow had come up past her bony ankles and soaked through her slippers. My current gift made her follow me up here, he said. Whatever. Nothing new. The same old insults I'd heard 1,000 times. Otho closed his eyes and tilted his head back so the twin moons would shine on his face.
Hi, welcome back. I'm back. I have finished all of the books that I thought I would love, and well, almost. We've got to talk about the last 3. It's raining outside. It's very like dark and dreary and cozy and perfect for reading, but I also feel like I'm like catching something in my throat and it just hasn't really gone away. I've just been like coughing. So I have my water. So we need to talk about Americanah. I don't know why I thought I had already recorded my thoughts on Americanah. Like when I finished it, I literally must have hallucinated it because there is no such record. So anyway, I read Americanah and I did talk about it in my back to school vlog a little bit. I was going back and forth between audio and the print version of this. Let's get into what this book is about. We're following two young Africans, Ifemelu and Obinze, who are like basically childhood sweethearts. They grew up together. They kind of were like first loves, you know, and their dream is to travel to America to kind of like make it, right? Well, Efemelu gets that opportunity to go to America. Obinze doesn't get to make it to America. Instead, he goes to London. He goes to the UK. We're following both of their stories. I love how this is really like an observation of culture. They talk about in the book how when white people talk about culture, they really mean race, which is very true in most instances. But I'm using culture in the actual term that I mean it, which is the literal cultural differences between Americans, African Americans, and then Africans or African immigrants coming to America or even going to, you know, Western society, white Western society, and the experiences that they have. Really fascinating stuff. As you can see, I have tabbed it up quite a bit. I finished up the second half in audiobook, and I didn't really get a chance to go and annotate the last little bit. Like I did go back and get some like ones that I could remember to get, but I honestly just want to go back through the second half, the entire second half, and annotate some more passages. That's the other thing about this book is that there's so much in it. And I was at first so intimidated by this book. I remember talking about how I was like afraid to read it because of the heavy stuff that I've heard that's in it. And there is heavy stuff in it, but it is not hard to read at all. And I should have known that she would not be hard to read based on the other stuff that I've read. I guess I was just a little intimidated, but really enjoyed reading it. I really got through it pretty quickly too. Like it was very well paced and very interesting. Like each chapter brought something new and interesting. I loved it. Let me just say, it was a hit. It was definitely up there. Not just met my expectations, but exceeded my expectations for sure. Let's talk about Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye. I tried to read this. I really did try to read this. As you can see, I got about a quarter of the way through that book, not a half, but I tried really hard to get halfway through this book. And I've got to be honest with you. I was struggling. I was really struggling. I had no motivation to read this book. I had no interest in reading this book. And I started out loving it. Like I started out being so into it. And then the chapters and chapters upon pages that I'm just like, I don't care about some of this stuff. Like some of the stuff, like I get it's supposed to add to the vibe of the book, but to me it just became kind of slow and boring and just not the kind of like detail that I really was like adding to the story for me. Like I felt every time we did get to something that was like interesting or intriguing, it was like a tiny little taste. And then it was just like, now we have to wade through all of this memory to get to the next interesting tidbit. So I stopped reading it. I might be missing something with this book. If I'm missing something with this book, please put in the comments and tell me, because I love Margaret Atwood. There's just too many other books that I want to read right now. Like the way other better books that I want to read that are just interesting me way more. So tell me if I'm missing something, if I need to wade through the rest of this book to understand it and to get it and to be into it. I'm not feeling this book at all. And I tried for a month and I'm not going to try anymore. Sorry. The last book that I thought I would love that I finished was Veronica Roth's The End and Other Beginnings. This is a collection of short stories, sci-fi. They're pretty much all sci-fi fantasy in nature. I really loved the whole book had this theme of like losing and like dealing with loss and dealing with grief. I liked that. I liked the whole theme of the book. The individual stories themselves were not, the individual stories were not super like 5-star captivating to me. They were interesting. The first one was kind of meh. I was like about ready to be really not impressed. The first one I really did not vibe well with. But the rest of the stories I really did enjoy. Having said that, none of them were like hitting it out of the park for me. They were just kind of like, okay, cool, interesting. I like the concept. A couple of them felt like I needed to read a longer book in order to understand the context of some of the stories. But like I said, the whole theme of like dealing with loss and dealing with grief was very fascinating and interesting to me. And I did really enjoy like reading stories that had to do with that were like YA focused. But it doesn't get 5 stars just because like each individual story was really only like 4 stars each. So, but it wasn't bad. I didn't hate it. Okay, so let's go through the books that I loved out of this batch and the ones that I didn't love. So I'm going to go ahead and say, like, it's not that I loved it, but I didn't hate it. So I'm gonna count this as a win. I'm going to say check mark, thumbs up for Veronica Roth. Unfortunately, thumbs down, no check mark for Margaret Atwood. Checkmark thumbs up for Americanah. Definitely loved it. Gonna be a reread. Gonna go back and annotate, putting it as a win. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I'm not sure where to put this one, to be honest with you. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I feel disappointed because my expectation was kind of high for this book, and it didn't really meet my expectations. So I'm gonna put it in the no. Thumbs down, didn't make it. And then the last one, Killing Moon, definitely thumbs up, check mark, winner. 3 out of 5. Again, 3 out of 5 books that I thought I would love, I ended up loving. Now I'm thinking about this, like now that I'm looking at the statistics of both of my experiments here, right? 3 out of 5 books ended up being good. Whether I had the expectation to hate it or whether I had the expectation to love it. So I don't know what that means. If I expect to hate it, maybe I should still read it. And if I expect to love it, maybe it's okay to DNF or like give it up if it's not working for me. So maybe that's it. I don't know what the lesson is here. I think I'd probably redo the experiment with different books and like do my top 5 and like my bottom 5 and then see. I don't know if that makes any sense, but maybe that would be a good way to redo the experiment and see if I get similar results. I'm happy with getting these 5 books read off my shelf, and 3 out of 5 majority ended up being pretty awesome. That's the end of this video. If you made it to the end, go ahead and tell me what books you think I will love based on the ones that I liked out of this pile. Or, you know, tell me what book you thought that you would love and you ended up hating. Join the discussion down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!